Proceed with my opening remarks. I want members and staff to know that we will be going until 11 o'clock, and then we will recess during a classified hearing related to what's happening on a foreign relations issue. So we will have that hearing, and then we will reconvene immediately after that. We'll have a more precise time in the future, but we'll go forward with 45 minutes now and then come back after the classified hearing. So today we are considering 3 nominations to help lead the Department of Homeland Security. William Valdez to be the Undersecretary for Management, Kenneth Weinstein to be the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis, and Dmitry Kuznetsov to be the Undersecretary for Science and Technology. Welcome to each of you, and congratulations on your nominations, and certainly appreciate your willingness to take on these incredibly important new roles. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, is our nation's 3rd largest agency, faced with a challenging task of coordinating efforts across the government to facilitate safe international travel and trade, manage disaster and pandemic response efforts, and safeguard our nation against a range of threats. However, in the 20 years since the department was created in the wake of the horrific 9/11 terrorist attacks, new and very sophisticated threats to American communities have emerged. DHS needs qualified and steady leadership to help tackle these challenges, including persistent cyber attacks that threaten our national and economic security, vile acts of domestic terrorism that terrorize communities across our country, and continued threats of violence against public officials, from local school boards to election workers. DHS's response to these threats is compounded by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and increasingly extreme weather events that damage homes and small businesses and endanger lives. To successfully combat these threats, DHS must have a dedicated and experienced leadership who will continue to support nearly 240,000 employees who work each and every day to fulfill this mission to keep all Americans safe. So I look forward to more closely examining the qualifications and experience of the 3 nominees here before us today. Mr. Valdez, if confirmed, you will work to ensure that the dedicated workforce at DHS has the tools and the resources to defend American communities. Ensuring this multifaceted department is nimble enough to tackle today's threats will require a multifaceted and comprehensive management approach. Mr. Weinstein, there is no question that the Office of Intelligence and Analysis continues to face enormous challenges, including low employee morale, and it is absolutely essential that the department's intelligence and analysis workforce has strong and steady leadership it needs to serve the American people and not political interest. INA must also improve its ability to address emerging threats, such as domestic terrorism, while respecting civil rights and liberties. Mr. Kuznetsov, DHS Office of Science and Technology must remain vigilant and responsive in conducting groundbreaking research to help our nation identify vulnerabilities in our homeland security so that we can close existing gaps and increase our capacity to address current and emerging threats. So thank you again to each of you for joining us here today, and I look forward to hearing more about how you intend to carry out the vital roles that you have been nominated for and how you work transparently with this committee. Ranking member, I'm sure, will be here shortly. He'll be recognized for his opening comments when he arrives. It is the practice of Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee to swear in witnesses. So if you will each rise or stand and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Our first nominee is William Valdez, nominated to be Undersecretary for Management at DHS. But before before I introduce Mr. Valdez and have you give your opening remarks, I would like to recognize Ranking Member Portman for his opening remarks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Prayer breakfast went a little long this morning, and I apologize for being a few minutes late. But welcome to our nominees, Mr. Valdez, Mr. Kuznets, Mr. Weinstein, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Each of you have significant background in public service already. You've been nominated for really important jobs at the Department of Homeland Security, and much of what you will do will provide other offices at the department, should you be confirmed, with the tools they need to be successful in the critical mission that you have. Mr. Valdez, you're going to oversee human capital, the Chief Financial Officer, the Chief Procurement Officer, Chief Information Officer, security, readiness, biometric identity. Much of that, if not handled properly, of course, would affect and undermine the mission of the department. We've got a lot of management challenges right now related to acquisition for border security assets and capabilities. We're concerned about the financial system modernization efforts. We haven't seen an organizational structure that has been improved much since the creation of the department, which I was strongly supportive back in the day, but I think it needs to be updated. So based on your 20 years of experience working on management issues at DOE and in the private sector, we look forward to hearing what your plans are with regard to DHS. Mr. Kuznetsov, you've been nominated for Undersecretary for Science and Technology, and I should say Dr. Kuznetsov. Strong background in physics and artificial intelligence, other issues. So we are interested, obviously, in strengthening our position against emerging technology threats like deepfakes, like artificial intelligence being misused. And we've done some work on that here in this committee, as you know, but we think the EDGE, the S&T Directorate, gives the department is very important, and we want to talk about prioritizing the right investments. And I know you talked about this in your interview, but we want to be sure that the research doesn't fall in the wrong hands, particularly research that you're funding, and we'll talk more about that. Mr. Weinstein, the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, obviously very important right now. The threat landscape has evolved a lot since you last served. This recent terrorist attack in the synagogue in Texas is an example of that. Foreign and domestic, we face so many challenges, and we're also dealing with emerging cybersecurity and critical infrastructure threats, as you know, and particularly what's going on in Ukraine today. A lot of us are concerned about that and the potential for that escalating. And, of course, asserted threats in places like China. So we'll hear from hearing from you about those issues. I will say I was concerned to hear some of your previous work for the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation. So I know you're prepared to talk about that today, or you should be, so I look forward to asking a question about that. And again, if you're confirmed, you have a difficult job ahead of you. The critical and timely information we need, even here on the Hill, we saw was lacking with regard to the January 6th attack. And INA has also faced challenges in recruiting qualified talent, as you know, and has had high rates of attrition, consistently ranked among the lowest for morale. So we want to talk to you about that as well. So I, again, appreciate all three of you, your willingness to step up and serve in really important roles at this point. And we look forward to your testimony today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Portman. Again, our first nominee is William Valdez, who is nominated to be Undersecretary for Management at DHS. Mr. Valdez has over 20 years of experience at the Department of Energy, where he served in numerous capacities as a career senior executive and oversaw a broad range of specialties, including business services, planning and analysis, economic impact and diversity, and workforce development. In addition to his service at DOE, Mr. Valdez brings a wealth of private sector experience, including founding his own consulting firm. Mr. Valdez, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Porter, and distinguished members of the committee. I am honored to appear before you today I want to express my deep appreciation to President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas for their confidence in me. It would be the capstone and highest honor of my professional career if I am confirmed to return to public service as the Undersecretary for Management at the Department of Homeland Security. I would like to acknowledge the contributions that my family, friends, and my many former colleagues in the federal government and the private sector have made to my career, including my mentors inside and outside of the government. With me here today is my lovely bride of 45 years, Marlena Valdez. We met on our first day of school at the University of Texas, and she has been instrumental in whatever success I have enjoyed personally and professionally. Our three extraordinary daughters, Jamie, Sydney, and Marin, are accomplished professionals in their own right. I am thankful that my daughter Sydney and son-in-law Drew can join me here as well today at this hearing. Jamie and Marin are watching today's hearing, along with my 4 grandchildren, River, Beck, JD, and Layla. They are very proud of their poppy and are cheering me on. I mentioned my mentors, and foremost among them were my late father and mother, Pete and Donna Valdez, who instilled a public service ethic in me, and my late father-in-law, James Ramey, who believed in me when few else did, and encouraged me to pursue a career in public service. And a host of other federal and private sector leaders, too numerous to name, and who I emulated and learned from during my career. I thank them all. For too long, the federal government has been bogged down by inefficient business systems and processes that were out of date in the 20th century, much less the 21st century. I believe the DHS Management Directorate is well positioned to be an exemplar for other government agencies and could be at the forefront of changes in the way the federal government operates. For example, financial systems are being improved, Government Accountability Office recommendations are being implemented, and employee engagement and morale scores are rising across the department. As part of my confirmation process, I've had the privilege to meet with senior officials within the Management Directorate, and I can attest to their dedication, knowledge, and professionalism. I was deeply impressed with their passion for the DHS mission and their commitment to ensuring that our homeland is secure. I also know and hold in high esteem many of the senior career leaders at DHS from my past public service, and I very much look forward to working with them again if I am confirmed. My experience is that today's civil service is highly expert and is ready and eager to meet the challenges of the 21st century. They can do this if they are afforded the opportunity to be creative and innovative. Accomplishing this will require effort, though. Congress, other parts of the administration, including the Office of Management and Budget, and good government groups like the National Academy of Public Administration and the Partnership for Public Service. Throughout my career, I have built a reputation as someone who engages with stakeholders to find solutions to tough problems. I am eager to undertake this challenge at DHS. My goal, if I have the privilege to be confirmed as the Undersecretary for Management, is to work with the department and component leadership, Congress, and other key stakeholders to make the Management Directorate a world-class operation that is at the forefront of new ways of doing business. I believe that the knowledge and experiences that I have acquired throughout my career have prepared me for this opportunity. The DHS Management Directorate is one of the most complex organizations of its kind in the federal government and has a host of large scope of authorities and responsibilities. Its work impacts every aspect of DHS operations. If I am confirmed, it will be my solemn obligation to do everything in my power to make the Management Directorate as successful and effective as possible to enable the department and its operational components to undertake their vital missions. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Valdez. Our next nominee is Dmitry Kuznetsov, nominated to be the Undersecretary for Science and Technology at DHS. Mr. Kuznetsov currently serves as the Deputy Undersecretary for AI and Technology at the Department of Energy. In his role, he leads efforts on emerging technologies and AI innovations in the department, including through the creation of a new AI office. Prior to his leadership at DOE, Mr. Kuznetsov served as senior advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Energy, chief scientist at the National Nuclear Security Administration, where he led their high-performance computing program and was responsible for delivering the world's fastest supercomputers. Mr. Kuznetsov, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm deeply honored to be here as the President's nominee to serve as Undersecretary for Science and Technology for the Department of Homeland Security. I'm grateful to the President and to Secretary Mayorkas for the trust they have placed in me, and to you for your consideration of my nomination. DHS is responsible for some of the most significant and diverse challenges our nation faces. The opportunity to join in the service of our homeland and to contribute is very humbling. None of this would be possible without the patience, encouragement, support, and understanding of my family. My wife, Jacqueline, a daughter of Ohio, who is here today and sitting behind me, has been a partner in everything we have done from the start. My family that could not be here today includes my son, Major Nick Kuznetsov, an orthopedic surgeon serving at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and his wife, Tasha, and two daughters, Emily and Arabella. My daughter, Dr. Lara Marquez, an infectious disease epidemiologist, epidemic modeler, and cost-effectiveness researcher at UC San Diego. Her husband, Jose, and their two sons, Cameron and Sutton. And I'm sure my mother is making every effort, Evelyn, to watch this online. Nothing I do would ever have been possible without them and many others who have helped along the way. I only hope that I can stand up to the expectations that they have for me. Science and technology have critical roles in safeguarding the homeland. As a scientist and senior leader, I understand that science and technology can be very distinct, non-overlapping enterprises. One does not necessarily lead the other. Some technologies can even evade scientific understanding and still find great utility. Good science is its own critic, and it blossoms in fields that you tend. Technology, on the other hand, is evaluated on how effectively it can be used. Both science and technology are critical to DHS, to identify scientific gaps that need attention and to find the means to draw the right technologies into practice. The near term and the long term must be balanced to ensure not only that the ecosystem is there when you need it, but also that the operational components and first responders have what is needed not only for today's problems, but also for tomorrow's. I have found that successful technologies require strong alignment with partners, especially the private sector, where risks can be shared in the early stages, but more importantly, for providing paths to sustainability and transitions to operational uses. I also believe that there is no silver bullet technology, and the most important requirement is vigilance towards the ever-changing landscape of risks, threats, and opportunities. We are in a time of remarkable technology change, of remarkable opportunity, of unimaginable innovation, of things we could not have dreamed of just a few years ago. At the same time, this makes the needs for securing the homeland even more pressing. I welcome these challenges and the opportunity to contribute to the best of my abilities. I have had the pleasure over the years of working with the DHS Science and Technology Directorate, and I've seen firsthand the tremendous dedication, commitment, and skill set of its workforce and its contributions to the various mission sets of the department. If confirmed, it would be a distinct honor to work with this team to help safeguard the American people, our homeland, and our values. Thank you for your consideration of my nomination. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kuznetsov. Our final nominee is Kenneth Weinstein to be the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis at DHS. Mr. Weinstein is a partner at Davis, Polk & Wardwell LLP, where he specializes in corporate internal investigations and civil and criminal enforcement proceedings. In addition to his private sector work, Mr. Weinstein has decades of experience in several high-ranking roles in the federal government. His tenure includes serving for 19 years in the Department of Justice including as an assistant U.S. attorney in New York and in D.C., as serving as general counsel, then chief of staff to Robert Mueller at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Welcome, Mr. Weinstein. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, distinguished members of the committee, I'm profoundly honored to appear before you today as the nominee for Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis at the Department of Homeland Security. I'm joined here today by my wife, Elizabeth, and two of my daughters, Mackie and Cecily, as well as our dear friend, Kathy Keene. I also want to recognize my oldest daughter, Ellie, who's tuning in from law school out in California, as well as our youngest daughter, Natalie, who had a pre-existing commitment at her 6th grade class this morning. It means a lot to me that they're here today with me and that they've been with me throughout my career. I'm grateful to President Biden for giving me this opportunity to serve and the opportunity to work with his very strong national security team. I'm also particularly grateful to him for looking beyond political optics and selecting someone who previously served in a Republican administration. In a small but important way, that is a reaffirmation of the nonpartisan approach to national security that has traditionally been and must always remain a bedrock principle of our government. That is the same nonpartisan approach I always took during my 21 years of government service. As the chairman mentioned, I first served as a federal prosecutor for about a dozen years, handling a range of homicide, gang conspiracy, and white-collar criminal cases, and doing so without any consideration of politics and with a clear focus on protecting civil liberties and due process rights. I then pivoted after the 9/11 attacks to focus primarily on national security matters, helping the FBI reorient itself toward its intelligence mission after 9/11, establishing the new National Security Division at the Justice Department, running the Homeland Security Council as President Bush's Homeland Security Advisor, and once again, taking the same nonpartisan approach I had learned as a prosecutor in making every decision with full regard for its effect on civil liberties. During this government service, I worked closely with DHS and admired how the department established itself under the exceptional leadership of Governor Tom Ridge and his successors, and how it responded to a constant stream of natural and homeland security threats. I'm clear-eyed, however, that those threats have multiplied in the years since, as both the chairman and ranking member mentioned in their remarks, and that the DHS of today faces an increasingly complex threat environment from nation-state adversaries like China, Russia, and others who target our elections and steal our sensitive technology, and for cyber criminals and transnational organizations that victimize our communities. INA is critical to the department's ability to meet those threats. To use Secretary Mayorkas's words, DHS is fundamentally a department of partnerships, and it's INA's mission and job to make those partnerships effective by ensuring that relevant intelligence is fully circulated throughout the Homeland Security enterprise. INA performs a range of functions to accomplish that mission. It manages the information and intelligence sharing with our state, local, tribal, territorial, and private sector partners. It serves the intelligence needs of the DHS components and leadership. It leverages the information holdings of the DHS component agencies so as to identify and address threats to our national security, and it coordinates all information sharing within the department. If I'm confirmed, I will work hard, very hard, to enhance INA's ability to perform those tasks and accomplish its mission. First, I'm going to focus on the workforce, as you both alluded to this morning. As I've seen, it's a very strong and impressive group of dedicated intelligence professionals. As a manager, I've always believed that my first duty is to support my personnel, and as a leader of an intelligence agency, I will be particularly vigorous in defending their ability to deliver objective, unvarnished analysis that is completely free from political influence. I'll also carefully review INA's operational role in the Homeland Intelligence enterprise to identify and eliminate any unnecessary duplication and to focus INA's role in those areas where it adds particular value. I'll maintain a constant focus on the implications of INA's activities on privacy and civil liberties and the need for strong safeguards, oversight, and transparency in our operations. As we all know, we can only be successful at safeguarding our people, our homeland, and our values if we maintain the trust of our fellow citizens. And importantly, I will work very closely and in close collaboration with Congress and with this committee in particular. Throughout my public and my private sector career, I've always enjoyed a strong and very constructive relationship with the staff and members of this and the other oversight committees. And if confirmed, you can count on my being a very willing and collaborative partner in our joint effort to make INA as effective and impactful as it can be. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today and for the honor of considering me for this position. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you. There are three questions the committee asks of every nominee. So I'm going to ask each of you to respond briefly with just yes or no. We'll start with Mr. Valdez and work down the dais. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Second, do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Very good. I will normally start off with questions. I'm going to defer to Senator Hassan, who I know has some immediate business to attend to. So, Senator Hassan, you will be recognized with my spot.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that courtesy, and to you and the ranking member for this hearing, and to all of the nominees. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve, and our special thanks to your families, too. As all of you have acknowledged, nobody does this work alone, and public service requires a whole family commitment. So I'm grateful to all of your families. I want to start with a question to you, Dr. Kuznetsov. The Science and Technology Directorate plays an important role in researching, developing, and adapting new technologies that can help secure the U.S. border in coordination with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and other Department of Homeland Security components. This includes technologies to counter drones used for smuggling or attacks, or new detection systems that can screen people or vehicles before they actually reach the border. How will you ensure that the Science and Technology Directorate is prepared to support Customs and Border Protection and other border security agencies as they work to address new and growing threats?
Thank you, Senator. This is an important question because it talks about the balance needed in a complex portfolio, an eye towards the long-term investments to fill scientific gaps that you can't easily get if you don't prepare for them. But at the same time, understanding the emerging technology landscape, as you mentioned, drone technologies as well as new detection systems, edge devices and sensors enabled by AI are really developing quickly. Managing not only the skill set you need, but the balance of this portfolio is not a simple thing, right? Because one can be drawn into tactical needs and focus too much there and sacrifice some of the long-term needs, which in the end don't serve the institution. You know, over my tenure at the Department of Energy, I have worked these types of issues, maintaining the long-term view, right. Which takes some vigilance, I have to say, but while maintaining an ability to deliver tactically technologies that can be put into operational use. Yeah. It takes simply a lot of attention to this entire landscape, but it is one of the important aspects of S&T that I recognize.
Yeah, well, thank you for that recognition, because I think it is really important to be able to balance the immediate tactical needs and making sure that our personnel are getting the technology they use, especially at the border, but also making sure that you have the resources you need to build towards long-term capabilities as well, and modern ones. Mr. Weinstein, I want to expand on a topic that you touched on in your introductory comments. International terrorists and homegrown violent extremists continue to pose a grave threat to our homeland security. This includes the threat of terrorist organizations like al-Qaeda trying to reestablish operations from Afghanistan's Kunar province or elsewhere. If confirmed, how will you ensure that the Office of Intelligence and Analysis has sufficient personnel and resources to assess and address all of the various terrorist threats to the homeland, including threats from international terrorist organizations? You touched on the importance of the workforce in your comments, and I couldn't agree more. But we have just an awful lot of different threats to keep track of. And how do you envision making sure that you have a robust personnel to do that?
Well, thank you, Senator. That's an excellent question and one that I'm going to be spending a lot of time looking at. And that question being the allocation of resources, focus, and attention on the different threats. There's so many threats, as we all mentioned in our remarks. They've multiplied and they've become more diverse through different mechanisms now with cyber and now that we're in the digital age. It's not just the old-time kinetic threat. But to your point, we have to stand back and keep an eye on all those threats. In the first instance, obviously, we'll follow what the DNI says about their prioritization of threats. Specifically, however, as to international terrorism, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they've not gone away.
Yeah.
We kicked them out of Afghanistan in 2001, and they just regenerated. They started franchising around the world, ISIS, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, et cetera. So we've seen that we can't stamp them out. We've got to remain vigilant. And now we have to be extra vigilant, given that the Taliban are back in power in Afghanistan. We have to be very careful, use the over-the-horizon power that we have to prevent that Afghanistan from once again becoming a safe haven for terrorism. So I can assure you that within INA, we'll be intently focused on that threat, as well as domestic terrorism and the other threats that we're seeing today.
And making sure you have a balance of expertise within the personnel to really be able to pursue all of those threats.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you another question, because I'm also concerned about online radicalization, as I know you are, which can increase the speed and severity of violent acts before law enforcement can identify them and mobilize to address them. If you're confirmed, how will the Office of Intelligence and Analysis prioritize combating online radicalization?
That's a tough nut to crack. It has been since 9/11, and we saw people just lone wolves getting radicalized here in our communities in a basement without even talking to anybody, any like-minded terrorists, because they have the access to the radicalizing material online. INA, I know now, is focused on that. Have to do so very carefully, because obviously looking at open source information online raises serious constitutional concerns.
Right.
But I know they're doing that in terms of all types of radicalization, be it internationally radicalized terrorism or domestically radicalized terrorism. So I expect when I get in, I'm going to take a look at how resources are deployed within INA to do that, and make sure they match the priorities.
Well, I look forward to working with you on that. And now a final question to Mr. Valdez. The federal government's reliance on outdated and obsolete technology not only harms our ability to deliver services and prevent cyber attacks, but it also leads to wasteful spending. So if confirmed, what steps would you take to modernize information technology across the department? How would you encourage and work with component agencies that continue to rely on aging and expensive IT systems that both fail to meet modern mission needs and are costly to maintain?
You are absolutely correct, Senator, that is a problem, and it's throughout government. During my career at the Department of Energy, I did work on IT modernization. I know the challenges that exist to do that and the complexities of it. And similarly, in the private sector, in my consulting work, I consulted with major providers of IT solutions and federal agencies to take on this challenge. I'm aware of the work that's being done currently at DHS to improve the legacy system, to replace legacy systems, and then also to modernize the systems that help integrate the work at the department. And if confirmed, I would be very much involved in that effort.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you on that. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the courtesy, and thank you to all the nominees.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Before I recognize Ranking Member Portman for his questions, I just want to reiterate, due to a classified all-senator briefing, we will take a recess after Senator Portman has an opportunity to ask questions. We expect to reconvene at 12:30. The briefing is expected to last an hour and a half, so at 12:30 we will reconvene. With that, Senator Portman, you're recognized for your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the testimony from all three of you. You understand the seriousness of the challenges that you would face should you be confirmed. Mr. Weinstein, we know from a U.S. Trade Representative's report that a Chinese state-owned company called the National Offshore Oil Corporation submitted formal requests to Chinese intelligence services seeking information on several American oil and gas companies. In your questionnaire, you stated that as a lawyer in private practice, you did work for this company, the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation, apparently in relationship to this issue. Can you tell us what was the nature of your work for this organization?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. And I got a number of questions about this in my SISI hearing as well, and I think it's a very fair and appropriate area of inquiry. So just in short, early 2018, a colleague of mine who does trade work called and asked for for an associate in the white-collar group, I'm a partner in that group, to write up a memo about whether any criminal laws might have been implicated by the conduct that you just talked about that was in that U.S. Trade Representative report. I asked an associate to do it. He wrote up a memo. I reviewed it, and I sent it on to my colleague who was doing the trade work and wanted to take the administrative implications and include them with the criminal implications in a memo. It was 2.8 hours of work. I didn't talk to the client, never talked to the client, never advocated on behalf of the client, didn't make any calls. It was literally just processing the memo. Nonetheless, I take your point, the concern about the Chinese Communist Party and its approach to economic competition, economic, geopolitical, military competition with the United States. They're seeking supremacy of the United States in every way, and they're using whatever means are available, many of those means being completely inappropriate. And I understand that state-owned enterprises are often being used as vehicles for those means, and that people like myself need to take a hard look at those entities before doing any work for them. Just as I explained to Senator Rubio about this issue, I actually have long harbored serious concerns about the Chinese Communist Party, and back when I was Assistant Attorney General of the National Security Division, I started the Export Control Initiative that was focused largely on China and was banging the drum about how China was eating our lunch in terms of stealing our technology. And that's an area that I've been quite vocal about, both in government and then outside of government. And I can commit to you that if I go to INA, I'm going to keep an intense focus on that because, if anything, the approach by the Chinese Communist Party in competition with us has become more sharp-edged, not less sharp-edged over the years, and the danger is even greater than before. So I understand the concern about that matter that I worked on, and I will keep that concern close in mind as I conduct my duties in INA.
Well, I appreciate that answer, and I would say at the time that you oversaw the work by the associate and built some time to it yourself, as you indicate, I assume you were aware of the fact that years previous, it sounds like 6 years previously, based on the USTR report, that this company had used Chinese intelligence services to investigate American companies. Is that correct?
That's what the allegation in the report was, and I know that then a few years later, the U.S. and Chinese governments reached an agreement saying that they explicitly wouldn't do that in 2015. My understanding is that that agreement has now been breached, but back in 2012, according to the report, and I have no reason to doubt the allegations, that was in fact the case.
During your time at DOJ in the National Security Division, you indicate you did observe an uptick in Chinese nationals trying to steal American technology. Is that true?
Absolutely, and not only Chinese nationals. It was more just orchestrated activity, orchestrated by the Chinese Communist Party, focusing on industry by industry, trying to hoover up as much technology and sensitive data as possible, so that they could then sort of accelerate their development of technology over there. And it was quite brash, and that was not the era that is becoming very evident. We need to do something.
That's a good segue to my next question for one of your colleagues on the panel, but let me just ask you quickly for a quick answer to this. What do you think the role of INA is in all this, in addressing this economic threat from China?
I know they're doing it now. I got briefed on it. They actually have an operation focusing on exactly that, and I expect to maintain that, if not accelerate it.
Okay. Dr. Kuznetsov, along these same lines, there's recent data indicating that the Science and Technology Directorate is going to provide around $15 million in grants to colleges and universities each year, should you be confirmed. Bipartisan work that we did here in this committee, investigation, a report, I was the chair, Senator Carper was the co-chair, made it very clear that these Chinese talent programs are doing exactly what we just heard with regard to taking U.S. government-sponsored research back to China, using it for the rise of their own military and their own economic growth. We've proposed the Safeguarding American Innovation Act. It came out of this committee. It's an opportunity to get our federal house in order to be able to secure some of this grant funding, again, some of which will come from DHS. $150 billion total, by the way. What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree that it's important to secure DHS science and technology grants against Chinese espionage?
Thank you for that question. That's an important and pressing question, Senator. The challenges we face in dealing with science is that it thrives by being global, being international. That's how innovation is done. At the same time, we recognize that there are countries like China that are using some of our facilities, for example, to conduct work that fills knowledge gaps that help advance their goals. And so there are issues about data, about IP theft, and about the general technology side that we worry about. I have been at the Department of Energy working some of these issues. I have to say the way we have approached it has been a fusion of activities that started with our intelligence and counterintelligence functions. It is our researchers, it is the fact that we have intelligence elements at our laboratories, and we come together and we review the work. DOE, the Energy Department, has the advantage of having all of this under one roof, and it is also a rich funder of science and technology, so we can take a broad view. We have enough data to understand the nature of threats as we see them. I believe at DHS, if confirmed, this would be an important problem as well to look into. I would be very happy to work with my colleagues here, if confirmed as well, with INA to help understand this. But I believe interagency is also important. There are pieces of research that are being funded by other parts of the government, and you couldn't do it alone in a single department without richer conversations across funding agencies of science and technology. So I would take a broader approach to this if confirmed. I do think it's important, but it'll take some teamwork.
Have you looked at the Safeguarding American Innovation Act?
No, sir, I have not yet.
Okay. We're going to have some follow-up questions. I'd love for you to take a look at it and get your view on it. We're trying to get it passed right now as part of this so-called USICA legislation, competitiveness legislation that's passed the Senate with Safeguarding American Innovation Act in it and trying to ensure it's in the final product. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked directly with Chinese entities yourself? Have you ever had a grant from the Chinese government or any other compensation?
No.
But you have been exposed to the issue, it sounds like, in your research over the years, so you understand the necessity for us to protect our research.
Yes, absolutely.
My time is expiring. Just quickly, Mr. Valdez, as you know, the Undersecretary for Management is responsible for all these major acquisitions. We're behind on a bunch of them. We're behind schedule on the biometric entry-exit program for land travelers. I was just down at the port of entry in Nogales, Texas, seeing the strong need for that. They want it. The cross-border tunnel threat surveillance program and the integrated surveillance towers, the ISTs. And this is all happening in what I believe is the worst border crisis, and I think the numbers bear that out, in our nation's history when you add the narcotics issues with the illegal migration issues. If confirmed, what will you do to ensure that these critical acquisition programs are delivered sooner to enable Customs and Border Protection and the Border Patrol to do their work?
That's an excellent question, Senator, and I have experience in this area, managing major acquisitions and overseeing that they do not fall out of scope and cost. I think the key is rigorous oversight of these kinds of projects, and my understanding is that when you have projects that fall particularly out of scope, it's usually caused by three things. Either the technical requirements have changed, there's mission creep, or conditions in the field have changed. there are ways to manage that. And so if confirmed, I would do a root cause analysis of the existing projects, see what the causes are for them falling behind on scope, and then work to remedy that.
Well, I think conditions on the ground have gotten worse, that's for sure. So to the extent that's one of the considerations, I would hope that you would want to expedite those kinds of projects should you be confirmed. Got a lot more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence this morning. I'll submit them as questions for the record. Appreciate your prompt response and full response. And again, thank all three of you for your willingness to step up and serve.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Parman. As I mentioned, we will now take a brief recess to attend all Senator classified briefing. We will reconvene this hearing at 12:30. ready to go. Apologize for that recess, but it was an important briefing, and we're in a vote series right now, so we're in one of those days where members are coming and going, and we're trying to conduct our business, so thank you for indulging us, but again, congratulations on your nomination. It's good to have you here before us. My question for Mr. Valdez, the Department of Homeland Security has certainly struggled with low employee morale since its creation 20 years ago. And a priority of, I think, every member on this committee is to ensure that the career workforce at DHS has the support that they need to keep the country safe each and every day. And so my question for you is a significant responsibility of the management director is human resources and personnel, as you know. Can you highlight 3 ideas or concepts that you would like to institute to engage and empower the DHS workforce if confirmed?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. And I think you've touched upon one of the most critical issues at DHS, and completely agree on that. I think the approach that I would take when dealing with morale issues at the department is to first try to understand the root causes of the morale issues. And I think at DHS, they have some unique challenges that they face to understand what the morale issues originate from. From my observations from an outside observer, I think the root causes are probably the fact that so much of the workforce is forward-facing. They are in very high-stress jobs, such as TSA and CBP. And so I'd first seek to understand what the root causes are. Then the second thing I would do is ensure that there is leadership attention to this. And what I've learned over my career is that leadership commitment to solving this problem and being engaged in the problem is absolutely vital. So if confirmed, I look forward to working with the Secretary and Deputy Secretary and other senior leadership to demonstrate that commitment in tangible ways. And then third, I think the most important aspect of low morale in general is a lack of engagement with the workforce in the actual business and the mission fulfillment of an agency. And so I would seek to find ways to engage the workforce more actively in the mission and also in the decision-making processes at the department to make them feel that they are part of the mission.
Very good. Mr. Weinstein, more than a dozen civil rights and immigrants' rights organizations sent a letter to the committee raising questions about your role in what they call the Bush administration's, and this is going to be a quote from their letter, failed policies that singled out Americans and immigrants, particularly of Muslim, Arab, and South Asian backgrounds, as part of the government's post-9/11 dragnet investigations, end of quote. I certainly appreciated our conversation that we had earlier this week about your involvement in the program, and a program that targeted young men from Muslim-majority countries for law enforcement interviews out in the community, which is of particular concern of that community, as well as other surveillance activities that they've experienced over the years. So my question to you is, can you talk about your role in these programs and share for the committee what you learned from the criticisms of these programs that you would bring to the INA if you are indeed confirmed?
Thank you, Chairman. And I want to say I appreciate the meetings that I had with you and your staff about this issue. I also actually appreciate the letter. The letter did what this process should do, which is look back at episodes in a nominee's past and ask the tough questions about what role they played in those episodes and what their intentions were. I also appreciate that the two advocates that coordinated the letter actually met with me, Hamad Alam and Chris Habibi. We had a lengthy meeting yesterday, and it was, I very much appreciated them taking the time, and I appreciated their approach. The approach they took, look, it's not what people expect of DC, the sort of confrontational, agenda-driven kind of approach. Rather, it was the approach that I've received, throughout my career dealing with civil liberties groups who are questioning government operations, which is a very thoughtful discussion about the intersection of civil liberties and national security and their concerns about how things were calibrated in relation to the various policies that you just talked about. We had a very frank discussion about their concerns, and their main concern, frankly, was the one that you alluded to, that immigrant communities, minority communities after 9/11, especially those of Muslim faith, felt like they were being singled out and stigmatized by some of these programs that took place in the aftermath of 9/11. And in this case, it was 9/11 and then the Muslim communities. Today, it's COVID and the Asian communities feeling the reaction to that national crisis. And in my parents' generation, it was World War II and Japanese American communities and racism and internment. So it's an ongoing issue in our society. We talked about that, and we also talked about it specifically in relation to the interview program that you talked about. It was called the Interview Project, and without getting into all the details, it specifically was a project directed by the Attorney General in which 5,000 or so young men were identified from countries where al-Qaeda had a presence who would come over to the United States, and the effort was to go out and have them interviewed to see if they had intelligence about al-Qaeda operations or plans that might help to find out about and neutralize a second wave attack that everybody thought was going to happen. I was able to explain to them my role in that, and essentially it was that the Attorney General sent down the lists that INS had compiled of these people and asked us to send them out to the U.S. Attorney's offices. I was the head of the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys at the time in Main Justice, and my colleague whom I was working with at the time and I realized that this would raise the profiling concerns, singling out concerns, if these lists just went out to the field and for interviews. So we compiled very lengthy, in-depth guidance about how these interviews should be conducted with dignity and courtesy, and these people should only be treated as witnesses, and their cooperation should be voluntarily. So I was able to explain that to put my role in that project in perspective. However, I think the important thing for me, frankly, was I was able to explain how, all that guidance, that was all well and good. But no matter how much guidance you put on something like this, if you have a project or initiative that singles out a particular nationality, they're still going to feel the sting of that, the affected communities. And that's exactly what happened to those communities. They felt the sting of it. They felt like they were singled out, no matter how courteous the interviewers were. They explained that to me. I explained how I'd come to realize that is true and that there's really no way around that. And so we talked about, obviously, going forward and my understanding of that concern and my commitment that if I end up in INA and there's ever an initiative like that that's being considered that identifies subjects based on nationality or religion or any other criterion of that type, that I would look at it with a skeptical eye, that I'd make sure to apply the INA guidelines that prohibit any collection based on nationality or religion, and that I would reach out to the affected communities. And that, I think, is just to wind up my point here. I think that's a very important point, that it's critical, excuse me, it's critical that whenever you're dealing with any sort of investigative project or effort relating to a particular community, you engage with that community. You don't just act upon them, you act with them. And that was a failing in respect to that project. And that's the approach I've taken as U.S. Attorney in D.C., dealing with the community in D.C., excuse me, that was affected by our law enforcement operations. And that's absolutely vital to the integrity and perceived integrity of any operations going forward at INA. So they have my commitment, and you have my commitment. In the future, I'll keep that lesson in mind, and I will engage. And I expect that yesterday's meeting was the first of many such meetings in the future.
Well, I appreciate that. Senator Rosen, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chair Peters, and thank you all for being here today and accommodating us over the break for our classified briefing, and thank you for your willingness to serve. I want to get right into it and talk about U.S.-Israel cyber cooperation, because as cyber threats become increasingly sophisticated, allied cyber interventions can play a critical role in providing the U.S. with cybersecurity solutions that enhance our homeland security. So with China, we know they're set to overtake the U.S. in research and development spending. We should leverage allied innovation advantages to maintain our technological edge. To address this challenge, last year I introduced bipartisan legislation to establish a $30 million grant program within DHS Science and Technology Directorate to support the joint U.S.-Israel cybersecurity R&D initiatives. In December, that legislation became law as part of fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. So, Mr. Kuznetsov, if confirmed, can you commit to working with me and my team on the implementation of this legislation? And more broadly, how would you partner with other allies and these allies to enhance the U.S. technological competitiveness?
Thank you, Senator. You bring up an important point about the role of allies in some of these key areas, notably cybersecurity. With Israel, I have worked with the Israelis on a number of issues in recent years, including cybersecurity as well as other areas of science and technology cooperation. The Israelis have a unique way of cultivating their workforce. From the age of 18, they find the best and brightest, and they pull them into a 5-year commitment for real-life work in cybersecurity. They come out at the age of 23, and they are well funded by remarkable funding from private capital and the Israeli Innovation Authority for startups. And so if you look at where cyber innovation is worldwide, Israel is at the top of the list in terms of startups and companies that are really making a difference. And there is this rich diversity, as you point out, of ideas that have been generated. And I agree with you on your point that there is opportunity to be had there because they are well-funded, they're innovative solutions, and some of this is finding the right means to partner. I do like working internationally. I think there are opportunities to work with allied countries in key areas of science and technology where the more voices you have, the more partnerships, the more innovation you can generate that hopefully help solve a lot of our common problems. So I would welcome the opportunity to discuss how to move forward with partnerships with Israel and with others as well in areas like cybersecurity.
Well, I'm very focused on cybersecurity and particularly our workforce. Recently introduced the Cyber Ready Workforce Act, many others, because we know that cyber attacks on this country are going to be, they're so vast now, and they're only going to increase in nature and scope and power all across our nation. And so I want to kind of keep on that subject. So, Mr. Valdez, every 2 years, the Government Accountability Office releases a high-risk report identifying areas of government at a high risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. And in the most recent report, released in March of last year, listed strengthening DHS management functions. That's a high-risk area. And so the report noted that additional progress is needed in the area of IT management, citing an Inspector General finding that DHS did not have an effective strategy to manage its risks for all systems, and that it did not timely apply security patches and updates to mitigate security vulnerabilities on some IT systems. We've had many hearings on this. This is a critical component to our national security and safety. So, Mr. Valdez, I know in your current position you focused on using technology to improve acquisition, human capital, financial management, and other processes. So what are your plans to do this at DHS to protect us?
Thank you, Senator Rosen, for that excellent question. Before I answer it, I would just, on a personal note, my mother's maiden name was Rosen, and I do wonder if we're separated, ancestors.
Well, probably with my husband. It's my married name, so we can check that out after the hearing.
I'll go to Ancestry.com.
Okay.
But in answer to your question, I think the SolarWinds attack and the other cyber attacks that have occurred, made it clear that federal agencies in general were vulnerable to the to cyber attacks. And in my experience, both as a federal, former federal executive, but also in the consulting work I've done, this has been an area where I have done some work. And if confirmed, I would commit to doing a top-to-bottom review of the current state of cyber preparedness at DHS. My understanding is that the management directorate has responsibility for the internal systems, and which is the subject of your question.
Yes.
And but they work cooperatively with CISA to ensure that the patches, the remedies are taken care of. So my first commitment would be to understand the work that's already been done, and then if confirmed, I would be delighted to come back and have a conversation with you and your staff about what I've observed and what the possible remedies are.
Yeah, I think we need to have a coordinated approach that is standardized across all platforms, because we know, particularly in critical infrastructure that DHS is protecting, we want to be sure that we close those vulnerabilities off as quickly and as smoothly as we can. And I'm going to move quickly. And I have just, can I finish my last question? Thank you. I'm the only one here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So domestic terrorism intelligence. Mr. Weinstein, as you know, Secretary Mayorkas announced last year the creation of the Intelligence and Analysis Domestic Terrorism Branch. I'm glad that he did that. And so thinking about reporting, how we use our computer systems, how we're doing all of this, if confirmed, how will you ensure that everyone has the authorities and the resources your new office has to produce timely, and I would say even more importantly, actionable information sharing on the threat posed by domestic terrorists? We see this over and over again. Domestic violent extremism in the form of anti-Semitism, one of the #1 crimes here in the United States, hate crimes all across this country. It's important that we act upon this in a timely fashion. So how are you planning to structure that communication so that communities can best protect themselves?
Well, thank you. That's a vitally important question, and I think you really get to the essence of what INA was designed to do. INA sort of is at the crossroads or the bridge between the intelligence community, DHS, and state and local, territorial, tribal, and private sector partners. And the whole idea of INA, as I understand it, is as to all the threats that are within the Homeland Security sort of mandate and portfolio, is to make sure that the intelligence that is derived from intelligence community operations, derived from DHS components, the various components that develop intelligence that's useful as to each of these threats, and that's all integrated with the wealth of intelligence that our partners out in the states have, state and locals, territorial, tribal, and then also the private sector, in particular as it relates to cybersecurity, ransomware attacks, and that kind of thing. So that's the general idea behind INA. And so the question, as you've laid it out very appropriately and clearly, is what are the processes? What are the procedures? What are the sort of the mechanisms that are in place to make sure that happens, in particular as domestic terrorism? And that's just one of the issues, right? Could be any of them, but just taking domestic terrorism, you can see all those parties I just listed would have some important piece of information that relates to any particular domestic terrorism threat, no matter what its motivation is, where it is on the political spectrum, and what its motivation is. Whether it's intelligence community getting information maybe overseas, whether it's state and locals who are seeing things on the street, that all needs to be integrated. So I know INA is very focused on doing that generally, very focused on staffing and supporting the fusion centers around the country. You know, there are 80 or so fusion centers.
We have one in Southern Nevada,
Okay, there we go. In what city is it?
Las Vegas.
Is it in Vegas? Okay. It's they're a crucial mechanism for that sharing, and I know that just recently the department has committed to staffing up the last of the 80 or so fusion centers, the last 6 or 7 that don't have an INA person there. So I'm going to be very focused on that effort as it relates to all the threats, but particularly threats to terrorism.
Thank you. And I think it's just important that information isn't siloed. So something happens in city A or state A, it's shared with state B, all the other states. So in case there's coordinated efforts across different communities, that would be a really important piece for you to bring together. So thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair, and thank you all.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Dr. Kuznetsov, the Science and Technology Directorate is tasked with the research and development of technologies across the broad range of issues to assess DHS components and first responders across the country. And this includes everything from climate change resiliency, border security, transportation security, and the list goes on. But the Science and Technology Directorate has at times struggled to meet requirements of DHS components. How do you believe the research and development efforts should be structured to ensure that they're actually delivering what they need to the clients that they serve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is an important question. I'm not at S&T, so I don't have a lot of insight into how effectively things are being done today, but I can comment on experience I have in parallel efforts that I've done at the National Nuclear Security Administration. The challenges are in trying to ensure you meet the expectation of those that own the risk. In this case, DHS, it would be the first responders and operational components. There has to be a place in the conversation in the development of technologies where they are partners in setting the requirements, defining the measures and the environments that they want to use technologies. But the partnership then has to include the deep bench at S&T that understands more about technologies, not only today, but where they're going, and also about potential scientific issues. You mentioned climate change. There are many interesting near-term and long-term factors there that come to mind. In trying to meet today's challenges for technologies, you want to make sure that you're also ready for tomorrow's. So, take first responders, for example, as I've looked at it from the outside, with fires, for example. Fires today out west burn hotter and they're larger. The frequency of lightning strikes has greatly increased. Consequently, there are more fires. The ground is drier. And so our understanding of spread is changing. And so relying on how we understood things to have happened in the past may not be scalable to how things should be in the future. Same is true for flooding and for other types of natural events. And so you would think that data acquisition, devices, technologies that are pushed into the field should have a sense of where the future might be going, so they are prepared and flexible to unexpected occurrences, unexpected outcomes. And so I would envision an S&T enterprise that would be closely coupled to the requirement side of operational components and first responders, clear metrics for what needs to be delivered and for what purpose, measures on what that delivery looks like, test and evaluation that are as robust as possible to capture operational environments, stressing them to ensure that they actually will do what you think they do, and this kind of end-to-end view of delivering to, again, those that will own the risk.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Well, I want to thank each of you for being here today, and also congratulate each of you for your nominations to these very important positions. So we look forward to continuing to work with you in the months and years ahead, if confirmed. And again, thank you, and great to see your families and other supporters either here in person or tuning in online. I know they were all here with you in spirit. The nominees have made financial disclosures and provided the required responses to biographical and pre-hearing questions submitted by this committee. Without objection, this information will be made part of the hearing record with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. The hearing will remain open until 12 p.m.